We're up and rolling again.
What?
We're up and rolling again.
Okay.
All right, we left off. Unfortunately, the last tape got cut off a little bit. David is born. So you now have your first baby. Tell me about, first of all, about David being born, what that was like.
What?
The experience. I don't mean the actual childbirth.
Oh.
having a baby for the first time.
Oh. It was fantastic. You know, it's this miraculous thing that you create. It was wonderful. I don't know. He was a really good baby too. Of course, I didn't know it at the time. And, you have to check to see they're breathing so often. He kept breathing. He was a good little guy. He really was.
How did it change your life?
How did it change your life? My God. Your life is never the same after children. I mean, the focus is totally switched around. It's not you anymore. Everything is focused on the baby. It's a huge job, You look at the baby and you're looking at 21 years at least. But that's what we wanted. That's what we did. And that's what we planned. So it was great. It was great.
The wire creeped up. So, what's the situation though? It's 1965.
Yeah.
Where are you living? What's going on? And
1965, we were living on 58th Street in the city.
This thing's not quite right.
You gotta let it just be wherever it is.
Yeah, I know. One sec. Once we start, I won't stop. Okay, go ahead.
On 58th Street.
Mm-hmm.
A bus ran in front of the street. That's how we got around. Because the first year, we didn't really even have a car. It was a nice apartment. It was at the first floor of an old Victorian house. So I had 12-foot ceilings. I had the biggest dining room I ever had to this date. It was a big room, a big living room. And our bedroom was the old kitchen. And it was very small. All the space was in the front. In order to open the dresser drawers, you had to sit on the bed so you could, not get knocked over with the drawers. And there was another small room there. I don't know what that had been before, but that's what we used for a nursery. So it was perfect size for a nursery. And then down the hall, there was a kitchen at the end of the house, which probably had been an old pantry. If you stood on the floor of the kitchen, you can stretch one arm out, you could touch the wall and touch the other arm to the cabinet. That's how narrow it was. It was little, but overall it was nice. We had a front porch. Dad took care of the grass and stuff. In fact, one summer he painted the porch. The landlord gave us money for the paint, and we painted the porch. And it was really a very pleasant apartment and very roomy. We had crazy neighbors upstairs with Stronax, who spent most of their time drinking beer and arguing. And since we didn't have a TV, sometimes we would just lie in bed and listen to them because their voices would come down a pipe that was in their bedroom. So you could hear it really clearly, and we used to track the arguments. They were not a happy couple. They were what we call an older couple. I'm looking back now, I would tell you they're probably in their 50s. But of course, at that age, I was 22 when I got married, so they seem real old. It's nice. There was a third floor, and there was a single lady lived up there. Never heard from her. It was convenient. We had the bus. The bus was one of the things I took to get to work. That's where we were. The apartment was only about 4 blocks from where I grew up on Willows Avenue.
Oh, I didn't realize how close it was.
Yeah, we was just walking distance.
And Nana and Pop were still there at the time?
Yeah, Nana Pop moved away that February when David was about 2 months old.
Oh.
In February of '66, and they moved to Sunny Hill at that point.
That was a big support system moving out at
What?
That was a big support system moving out at 2 months old there.
Yeah, in a way it was, but I felt self-sufficient. I didn't, it was nice to have him there, but it wasn't like a terrible thing to happen.
Oh, is that okay? Let's make sure. Let's make sure it's not this. I'm just making sure this is okay. Yeah, because we had a beep earlier before, and it was like, it was my one of being my thing. This thing is, it looks funny, so I'm sorry to keep doing this. Here we go. This will do it. So yeah.
Yeah, it was nice to have had them there, but I didn't feel abandoned.
Okay.
I really did not. My mother's cousins lived across the street from them, and they were still there. So it was my old neighborhood, really. I mean, I was across the street from the house of an old friend, my friend Emily, that I had gone to school with from 7th grade, through high school. So it was nice. We enjoyed it. It was a nice time of our lives. It really was. You had a nice, healthy baby. We were happy. We were broke, but.
Tell me about that 2-year period between 65, actually a year and a half. It's that 2 years between 65 and Dave's born. Before I'm born, he's a toddler. Dad was still going to school and working, and you had quit your job. What was that, just that period of life like?
It was very baby oriented. I did not have a lot of neighbors right there. And even my friend that had lived across the street was no longer there. She had gotten married too, but her parents were still there. It was just all I can remember of that time is being very baby focused. It was just David and me. And, we just had our own routine. Everything revolved around his schedule. I took him out all the time. We went with this coach. I had this enormous coach, and we walked everywhere. And then later in his stroller, we used to go down to the park, the same park I played in as a kid. I have some pictures of him when he was first learning to walk, pushing the stroller behind him. He actually walked out of his shoe. I had to run back a block to find it and just noticed, oh my God, he's got one shoe. So, yeah, I found it.
I remember the picture.
Huh?
I remember the picture.
Yeah, do you? Okay, yeah. I would take pictures of him. It was hard in the beginning because I wasn't used to so little sleep. So little sleep. Mostly I remember just plotting to get to sleep. I know that like the first month or so, it was January, it was pretty cold, but I took him out. I'd lost so much sleep. Took a walk, and I was on the parkway, and they had a park bench there. And I parked the coach in front of me, so I was facing it. And before I knew it, I was sound asleep. I was leaning over the coach, and I had fallen sound asleep, and it was like 35 degrees. I just went right out. I was like, oh my God. When I woke up, somebody could have stolen him. But, I mean, you know what it's like. You just dream about dreaming. Anything.
Why did you move out of Philadelphia, and how did you get to Penn Win?
We moved out because the neighborhood was really changing a lot. we wanted to own a house. We didn't want to raise children in the city school systems. So basically we were looking for a place with new school, a good school system. So we first started to look up in the Abington area. And we saw a couple places that we liked, but we didn't really care for the area. Somehow we just never clicked with a house there. And actually it was Uncle Bob who saw an ad for the house in Penn Wyn and said, "You'll like that neighborhood. That's really nice. That's where the neighborhood my in-laws live." I said, okay. Anyhow, we came down and started looking in this area because we wanted the Lower Merion school system. We bought not so much a house as a school system. Knew we weren't going to be able to do private school, and I didn't like the Philly schools, so it had to be a good school system. And that house was fine. We did buy that house. It wasn't a great house. You know, it lacked a lot of things, space, for one thing, but I loved the neighborhood. We had lots of friends on the street, and people who were doing the same thing we were, buying their first house, having their first babies. So we had kind of a little club there, and we enjoyed the neighbors. I mean, on New Year's, we used to do traveling dinners up and down the street. You know, somebody would do the appetizers, and then you go to the next house, and somebody else would do a dinner, and somebody else would do dessert, and like that. We chopped it up a little more, and we did lots of stuff like that as neighbors. Did stuff together, and it was a good place to be. It really was. I still miss some of those neighbors, and having that kind of togetherness there, where we all congregated out in the back in that driveway all the time. So we spent a lot of time back there, and the kids would run back and forth, all of you, on those big wheels that some neighbors complained about, but it was a good way to raise kids. It really was. And there were things to do. I mean, 4th of July parades, you remember that. I mean, that's the kind of thing we did. Got together and did stuff. I remember the 4th of July when the Dailies and who else was it? Jacob, the Farbers across the way, and we did that long train. Didn't think it was going to be that heavy. He dragged you all down the, we had fun. I had a lot of parties there where we'd do stuff. So it was a good time. It was a really good time. The house was tiny though, and it got tight, as you guys grew. And then Grandmom came, so it was, and there's always, the one bath. So we had 5 people, 3 adults and 2 kids on that one bath. That's a lot of traffic.
Yeah. We'll talk more about the house in a sec. You have David. You've moved in the summer of 1967. You're now saying, Dad's, doing his 2 jobs and everything else. You decide, okay, I'm gonna have a second child. So what was that decision? Was there a decision to be made, and then what happened?
Well, we wanted a second child, and we didn't want them far apart. We wanted children that would know each other and play with each other. We really, I don't know that we were so focused on finances as we should have been, or others had been. We really were not. It was like, well, we'll make it. We'll be fine. We would just go from paycheck to paycheck, and the bills got paid. We did stuff. We didn't do a lot. I mean, there was a period of 5 straight years we didn't have any vacation because we just couldn't afford that. I don't think I questioned it much. It was just how it was. The focus was we're going to have a family, so we're going to have a family. So we decided that, and sooner or later you came along. I had really wanted you closer 2 years, but it took 3. So, but it was, you know, it was fine. It was fine, you know. And at Penn Wynn, of course, we were not that far from Nan and Pop, so it was, you know, there was help. You know, I tried not to ask for any, you know, monetary help. I didn't do that. Only once. Although it was before disposable diapers. I was doing diapers, and the machine just died. You know, and there was just not enough anywhere to buy it, and Pop bought the washer. So I did buckle then, but I was very determined not to do that. I did not want that. I didn't want that. We were on our own. We were our own family, you know. And I'm sure if there had been some real emergency, something like that, they would have helped. And it was nice to know that there was some kind of safety net. But I was determined not to ask. That's all. Now, of course, Pop, if you remember Pop, did the same thing with me that he used to do with the boys. He'd visit, time to go, and he'd slip his hand in your pocket, and there would be a $20 bill. You know, I did keep those, yes.
Tell me about when I was born, and didn't quite go so well then.
No, when you were born, there was a problem. While I was in labor, they kept losing a heartbeat, and they thought perhaps, and it turned out to be true, that the cord was wrapped around the neck. But you were too far down to really do a C-section. So when they started to really lose the heartbeat, they just, well, you know, cut and went. When you were born, you were so blue you were almost black, because it had pulled on it. But they knew that at the time, and when they did pull it away soon enough, so there was none of that damage. He didn't pink up, though, and later on it was determined that there was probably a valve in the heart that closes after birth, but it didn't close, so it was open, in addition to an infusion of placental blood. So there was too much blood in the system, the valve opened, and the heart was faltering. So that was a little scary, a lot. At one point that day, they thought you had died. The nurse, you'd been put in the nursery, but you had turned totally black. And they really thought you had gone, but you hadn't. And they decided to transfer you to Children's Hospital, which at that time wasn't next door to Penn as it is now. It was someplace else downtown. I forget where. It was an old building, because they had smaller instruments for, you know, made for children. And they thought they were going to have to do some heart surgery. So they ran you through a whole bunch. You went there. Dad rode along and took you there, and Pop took me home. So we were there about 2 weeks, and they ran all kinds of tests and stuff. What was fortunate was that the valve closed on its own, so they didn't have to do it. You were still very sensitive to things. If you got suddenly cold, you would turn blue. You know, if you even laughed too hard, it turned blue. You're always returning blue. You spent the first 3 years just turning blue. We were always running back and forth, but it just disappeared. It was a sensitivity. Part of it was a sensitivity to any kind of painkiller. That's why I used to tell you, no aspirin. You know, that's all past now. But you know, it was just difficult, and you also were more difficult baby. You cried a lot, and you didn't sleep. And thinking back now and knowing you now, I think there was something bothering you. I think that the formula didn't agree with you, but they didn't have 12 kinds of formulas on the supermarket shelf the way they do now. And the stuff we gave, I think you probably just had some, hard times that way. So it was very tough in that sense, because I was always up checking at you, You stayed in the cradle next to me for a long time because I had to, I kept checking all the time. And then, of course, you didn't sleep much. I used to say to everybody, he sleeps when he blinks, that's it. And of course, your brother wouldn't sleep at all during the day because you were there. So he quit taking his nap. Nothing would persuade him to take a nap. So he was up all day and you were up all night. It was really interesting. It was really interesting. I mean, I got a terrible case of bronchitis, I think, in the first few weeks after you came home because I was just so damn tired. And when I went into the doctors with this horrible cough, I think you were about 6 weeks old, and I said to the doctor, I was sitting on my sofa and I looked out on my carpet and I could swear I saw scenes of things happening. And I know they weren't there. Right? And he said, you are so tired that your mind is dreaming. You have a certain amount of sleep. And he knew my mom. She had gone to him, it was Morton Silver. And he called her up in the office and said, can you stay with your daughter this weekend? She said, yeah. So she came over and I went to sleep. And I slept for 16 straight hours until Nana woke me up because she thought I was unconscious. She couldn't believe I was still sleeping. But I really needed that sleep. It was hard. It's like anybody, when you have a second one, you're dealing with the first. The first one's easy in lots of respects because if the kid finally sleeps, you can really sleep. So, it was hard in that sense. And of course, I was always a little afraid with you turning blue and all the rest, but you did outgrow that. It didn't turn out to be, anything permanent. It was just kind of an immaturity in the circulation system, and it was fine. We just tracked it, and finally said, "There's nothing wrong with this kid." And you were healthy. You were healthier than your brother. David would catch everything that came down the pike, and you would catch it too, but it would be over in a day or two. And David would hang on and on and on, and often he caught things you didn't. You had a better resistance somehow. So I think that's what got you through those early days, because you had a basically very strong constitution. You were a big baby. You were 8.5 pounds. So you had a lot to fight with. You were basically very healthy. But when you have two babies, it's like that. You don't have time to think about other stuff.
And Dad was working 2 jobs at the time.
He was working at silos at night. He was working during the day and then silos at night. So you were all mine those years. Later when Dad had lots of more time, of course, it was different. So yeah. But that's what those early days were like. But the neighborhood saved me. At some point, Nancy Daly and I switched afternoons. I would take her kids for an afternoon, and she could do whatever she wanted, and then she would take you two for one afternoon, and I could do whatever I wanted. And basically, we napped. She had 3. So there was some... it was one way to do it. I know, but you were tough. One time, you were not walking. It was that summer before you were a year old, and you would not stop crying. I fed you and rocked you and sang to you and changed you and everything. You just weren't going to have any of it, and I was exhausted. I finally said, I can see why people toss people, babies. And I pulled the crib side up as far as it could go. You couldn't possibly get out. And I actually walked out. I left the house. But you know how crazy you are when you're tired. You think, I'm going to just walk around the block because then I can hear him through the open. It was summer. I could hear him through the window in case something happened. And I had to walk around the block about 4 times before I could get back in. And by the time I came back, probably the whole thing took about 30 minutes. You were sound asleep. But, you get like, I can't do this now. I just can't do this now. I have to leave. So, by the time Jack came home, well, how are things? Well, now they're fine. Should have been here a few hours ago. Well, it was a long day. Dad left early, and he came home. He had dinner, and then he ran out again. And that was hard on him. But you know what? I keep telling you this. I didn't question it. That's what our life was. It was it. Yes, could have had other stuff in it, but we were doing what we had planned to do. Raising kids. That's it. That's, did the best you can at the time. So it wasn't so bad. It wasn't so bad. Summer before you were born, Nana and Pop took me down to the shore for a day as a break. Took Dave. I have pictures of that. I look like an elephant on the beach. But they tried to do stuff like that. I didn't leave you with sitters much because it's really hard to tell sitters. Now, when the baby starts to turn blue and they all say, geez, I forgot I had another date. Even my parents were a little afraid, But you were pretty sturdy other than that. So, eventually you outgrew it and it's done. Once you got into, I'd say 3 or 4, you became a very funny kid. A lot of fun. It was difficult because you didn't sleep. It was really tough. And you didn't eat. I used to tell the doctor he's living on air in his vitamin pill. He says, yes, but he gained this month. Well, I don't know on what. David was, either put in front, and it was done. It was just... I'll eat that pea. I actually made deals. If you eat 3 peas,
I've made similar deals recently.
You know how this goes. You just didn't eat. I didn't know how you were light. Dad used to say, I can pick him up by his little belt. Take him out of the tub, holding his little shoulder blades. You also were became afraid of the tub for some reason. I used to put the 2 of you in, and at one point you just wouldn't do it. You would not get in the tub. That's it. No tub. So for about close to a year, I used to bathe you, put David in the tub, and I'd stand you up on the toilet and scrub you down there. Because you wouldn't get in. You were afraid of it somehow. Something frightened you about it. And when it became summer, I filled a pool out back, and I thought, I'll try that. So I'd put you on when I'd float a boat all the way down the other end, hoping you would go after it, see if you would do that, get in the water that way. But you didn't do that. You would just whoop, and we're right around, go get it. I don't know. Eventually, you stopped, but you had lots of little fears like that. And I've told you about the vacuum cleaner. that whole thing. You were afraid of the vacuum cleaner. So, I had my desensitization program, as you recall. I left it in the middle of the floor. It was a canister one, that you dragged around, and I just left it there. So you could get used to looking at it without it making noise. And you would make a big circle around it. You wouldn't get near it. And eventually one day, you were sitting on it watching TV. And I thought, okay, we're making progress. And then next thing I did was put you down on the floor and in front of me. And I showed you the wand. And I see you can make it stop. So I would turn it on, I'd push the button, and it would stop, push the button. As long as you felt you could control it, you would stop being afraid of it. But that whole process took a couple of weeks because your nana was going, why is this thing in the middle of the floor all the time? Never mind, it's fine. It's fine. So, you know, but you know, you had things like that, little things. You just had to kind of work with you a little bit. Kids do. They get afraid of stuff. You don't know how it's hitting them. So otherwise, I hate to have to do it carrying you around. I used to vacuum with one hand. You never got off my hip. The neighbors used to say, "Did they cut the cord? Are you sure they cut the cord?" So you were very attached, much more so than your brother, who would just take off. He was just like that. I would lose him. I lost him the first week we were at school at Penn Wynn. I was doing clothes, and he was with me down there. And if you remember, it was a walkout basement. I turned around, and he was gone. Went right out the door. That's how I met Nancy Daly. I saw kids playing out there, and I knocked on her door and said, "Hi, I just moved in there, and my kid just walked away, and I don't know where he is." And she said, "Don't worry about him. You go that way, I'll go this way." And found him out on Manoa Road, lying down, not in the road, but lying down, and there was water coming down there, and he was floating leaves down the thing. One time he did the same thing. I was down there washing it, and he followed the trash truck. He liked to watch the guys push the button and let it go, and he followed it. In 2 minutes, he would be gone, and it never fazed him. Never fazed him. With you, I couldn't lose you on a bet. Wouldn't happen, never. I had little wrinkles on my clothes where you held on. Just totally different, totally different. You had to kind of work with you, but then you got more confident as time went on, and then it was fine. You have to go with where your kid is. You can't think of this point where you want him. You start here, where he is, and then move ahead. It just did. But you were a good kid. You were a giggler. You were a giggler. I love that. I wish we had recorded some stuff, but people didn't have the equipment that we have today, where everybody's got something. You hold up your phone and you're doing it. Even movies were silent, when you took things, or like videotape, that stuff. So that was an adventure. It was an adventure. It was fine.
So you spent the 60s not...
raising kids.
Yeah.
I have missed the 60s. I am totally, all that happened in the 60s, all of the riots and all of the flower children, all of that went whoop, because we were just focused there. There's like a period of time where we dropped out. There are old movies that went on at that time that I've never seen because we never got out to the movies. Just a whole period of time that was just lost. It was just focused high. But that's it. You emerge from that.
Somewhere in that period in the early 70s, kids are getting older. Your mother-in-law moves in. Tell me about that story. How was that? How did that come about?
She lived with her mom. They moved from the house in Philadelphia, and after her father died, they moved to an apartment in Melbourne, which I found for her. She needed to look, and it was hard for her to look, even. And I just called, and I found this place, and she liked it. And she moved there with her mother, who was in her 90s. And I used to go see them, take the trolley there. And, that one. I used to take David and tell him, "This is your great-grandmother." And he'd say, "Okay, great-grandmother, okay." And after a while, David is literal. he said to me, "Why is she so great? She just lies there." So she eventually passed away. She was really up there. I guess she was about 96 when she died. And I think my mother-in-law was running out of cash. So we said, "Why don't you come with us?" And so she did. She stayed for 12 years. So it worked out fine. She had that back room in the old house. And you guys shared a room, as you recall. Raising hell up there. And it worked out. So she stayed. She was easy to live with. Basically, she read a lot. You know.
We enjoyed it. I was asking Dad about it, but it must have been a different perspective to have your mom or mother-in-law there.
Well, there are adjustments. There really are. But she didn't have a lot of options. She really didn't. And she also told me once that she had this terrible mother-in-law, and she said, "I will never be like that." And she made a very big effort not to interfere, you know, not to be a problem. But as I said, she was easy. She didn't care what the house looked like. She was never a housekeeper. Not that I am, but she didn't care that my whole, operation is, well, nothing needs to be done that bad. I can wait for it one more chapter, it'll still be there. And that didn't faze her, because it didn't bother her in the least. She used to read sometimes these racy novels, and then she'd say, "Don't let the boys see this, but it's good." Oh, okay. So, and it was good after I started to work again, because at least I had somebody in the house. I hated when I substituted, sending you down to Mrs. Weinkoop's. I hated that, and you guys hated it, but I didn't have any options. So that's how it was. So it was easier. It was not, once she came, it was easier to do that with a clearer mind. But, I was there until you guys left for school, and there wasn't that much time at the end of the day between the school end and when I got back.
Actually, let's talk about that. It's the 70s. You've been home for 7 or 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
What was the decision to go back, and where did you go back to?
It was time. I had been home and doing stuff, and I needed to get out again. It was, it's too confining. I needed to talk to people and do something. I started substituting a little bit because it was easy to get. They were always desperate for substitutes, but that's combat, I don't care what school system you're in. That is tough stuff. I was substituting at the Haverford High School and the Haverford Middle. I didn't like it. I didn't like teaching all that much to begin with, and when it's not your class, you have no leverage. Kids do whatever. I just hated that. So I thought, I've got to get out and do something else. And I saw this ad for a part-time job as a searcher. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. I didn't know anything about it. I had no clue.
This is title searching.
Title searching. But I applied for it. Went all the way up, got interviewed. Office was in Jenkintown. It was like the end of the world for me at that time. And that's how I started into title. So, and I know the first week I came home and said to your dad, "I have no clue what this man is talking about. I'm just going to be here until I can find something else." But then I got a clue, and it got more interesting, and I ended up staying in title for 30 years. But that was the start of it. It was an interesting job, and it wasn't very confining either, because I was going around to 3 different courthouses and doing searches. Al was a one-man band, so He wasn't like somebody who had somebody in each courthouse to do those work. He didn't have enough to do that. So I made a circuit of Montgomery, Chester, and Delaware counties. And he taught me how to do this stuff, and it just developed from there, you know. So I started doing searches, and that got good, and then he taught me how to do closings, settlements, and then I didn't like this so much, but I did them, and it was interesting. And then work started to dry up a little bit, and he hated to write briefs, appellate briefs, you know, with his cases. So he showed me how the law library worked and what to do. And he gave me a pile of his old briefs, and I learned how to write appellate briefs. So I wrote them for about 5 years for him. Well, I said, he didn't like to do it. He said, well, I go in the library. I tend to fall asleep. I'm like, how did you get through law school? I got a good memory. But I liked writing briefs, you know, because I would go bury myself in the law library and put the stuff together. Today it's a little easier because it's all online. Then you had to pull the books out, and you had to be there, and you had to be up and down, and I used to put them together, bits and pieces, type them up maybe here or something, or just send them in with patches, and he had a lady in the office who typed, and she did that. But I wrote them for about 5 years. In between doing the other stuff, I still searched, and I still did closings, and I did all three. Didn't pay worth anything, but it was an enormous education. I mean, I really learned almost everything I know about the field there in those years. But he was, you know, he didn't pay you a lot. He was, like I said, he was a one-man band, and you boys were growing up in college, just looking at us down the road, and I needed to get something better. So that's when I started with title abstract, TA title.
Yeah. What was that like? When did you go over there?
I started with Al 75, I believe it was 1975, and I started at TA title in 83. Started in their examination department, which was, okay, that was the easiest job I've ever had in my life. It was very easy, because you would look at the work coming in from the searchers and make sure everything was right, and get back to them because something was screwed up, you know, that type of thing. It was very easy, but you got it, you looked at it, you corrected whatever, it went on, and you went on to the next one. You go home and sleep at night. It was very easy. And then Bill Cotter, who was the president of the company, put me on a project locating all of his records. He had old searches everywhere, in different buildings, different offices, everywhere. And what I had to do was find where they all were, because nobody even kept track of that. They all had numbers, so I could figure out, well, all right, we're missing this section, somebody must have it. And do kind of a plan to get them in one place, where we wanted it, what had to be microfilmed, and all this kind of thing. It was a tedious project, but he loved it. Dad's asleep. It's done.
You know, Mom, before you sit down,
Huh?
you stand up one more sec. Put the wrong chair down. Sorry. I'll put the cushion back. I can see your back. Hold on one sec. Just scooch over just on the chair itself. Leave the chair there, but just scooch your body over a little bit more to the right. There you go. Stand up 1 sec. Okay, now try. Ah, that's it. Thank you. That is it. That's the... I don't think I noticed this before. Okay, and say hello.
Hello. So, at any rate, that job, doing that, getting it all together and giving him this really comprehensive report and then overseeing all of the microfilming for that thing impressed him. And he asked me to be his assistant. So essentially, I worked directly with him. Not someone I liked. Somebody, he just made me crazy. He was a very volatile guy, very temperamental, very coarse. He really was. I don't know how somebody who has a multi-state company can be that coarse, but he was a pain to work with. I would come in the lunchroom and say, I am going to kill him. And everybody would yell, get in line. Very tough, difficult guy, very tough. But I learned a lot. The one good thing about him is that he always gave you a chance to do things. You know, he often picked people who couldn't do what he wanted, and he'd be very frustrated. But if you could do it, you really moved, you know. So I was there 7 years, I think. Yes, 83, and I finished out 89 and started with the Institute in January of 90. So I was with them about 7 years. But interesting guy. I could tell you stories about him, but he made me nuts. Truly, he did. He was very difficult to work with. And I ended up being a kind of a buffer between him and other people in the company that he would make crazy. I started handling a lot of personnel matters. Again, he gave you a chance to do things that you would not in a larger company maybe have a chance to do. Sent me to a lot of seminars so I could learn personnel law. I wrote a personnel manual for them, researched it and wrote that, and then presented it in the various parts of the company, different offices, so they would know what was in it. So I had projects like that. One time there was a fun project where he wanted to entertain realtors on customers for the title insurance company. And he threw a party at the Brandywine River Museum, invited close to 1,000 people to this thing. Of course, telling him that the capacity was somewhat less than that didn't faze him. Well, they won't all come. And that was a huge, huge undertaking. I remember that. It was a fun party, but I remember getting schools and churches in the area to allow us to park cars there because they only had room for 130 cars. So I had church satellite parking lots, rented a couple of vans and got some of the younger guys in the company to be van drivers. So they would park at these places and then they would shuttle them up. So we had a network of that. I had a whole group of people who just were there to give things out, or there were caterers, there was a band, there was unbelievable. And we had people on 3 levels, and if you've ever been there, it is a circular kind of a thing like that. And I was terrified that somebody was going to be damaging a painting or some sort. And I told the bartenders, I said, you're going to pour light. I don't care what they say. You just pass the bottle over it because I don't want people getting into trouble. And I had the van drivers ready to take people home so we wouldn't have a problem there, you know. I mean, I had talking to the insurance people about this. They went, their eyes were twirling in their heads. And then I had a crew of cleanup people, you know, and their job was to start at the top with a large trash bag and pick up anything that was on those edges, you know, so they wouldn't fall down into the thing. And I said, start at the top. When your bag is full, bring it to the basement and then start back up again. And I did it also, and I had my secretary, Rose, she and I did this thing. I mean, just coordinating the RSVPs and the calling, it's like, man, it was nuts. You know, thank God the people we hired as the caterers also did cleanup. And they did a fantastic job. I got a call from the museum the next morning, and I said to Rose, what painting do you think we bought? But they actually called to compliment us on the fact that the museum was ready for showing the next day. But that's the kind of thing he did. He overdid everything, everything. And one of something was never enough. He had to do 12, you know, it was never right. You know, one of my projects was writing their newsletter. I did a newsletter, which was fun. Because it was kind of nice. I like that, interviewing people and writing it up and talking about issues, whatever, you know. So I did their newspaper for them. That was a fun thing. He wanted it out more often because, like, he's always excessive. And I said, well, I can't, you know, either I do that, I could do that all day. I said, but you also need me to do this and this and this and this. You got to make a choice. And he said, well, I still want it more often. And in the masthead, where instead of saying, you know, printed monthly or printed weekly, you know, I just said printed in intervals, which ticked him off, but he wouldn't fire me because he knew nobody else was going to put up with him. We had lots of deep conversations, you know. And when he was at my retirement party and he spoke, one of the things he said, you probably don't remember, is he said, I was asked to see if she would be tough enough to handle this crowd, this organization, which tends to be a tough group. And he said, oh yeah, because I would not back down on something, because I knew some things were just impossible. He was just a pain in the ass. He really was. But I would draw my line. I can't. I'll do the best I can, but that's as far as I can go, period. You know, you have to make a choice. So that's what I did. But, you know, I took his tougher personnel issues on. He, despite his combativeness, despite his confrontational attitude, could not fire people. He just couldn't fire them. So I did it. I would have to call them in and fire them. You know, and I'd say, why, you know, you can do this. This is your job to do this. If you don't want that manager, no, I want you to do it. All right. So that was sticky sometimes. But, you know, I did learned a lot. You know, I would settle disputes sometimes. We had a whole department of young girls, really. You know, not even young women. These were popped out of high school. I couldn't possibly call them women. And they just fought with each other all the time. So I remember I had the pair of them come in one time. I was take the complaints anymore. You sit here, you sit there, you tell me what's wrong, and you don't say a word until she's done. Okay, so she did that, and she started, no, don't interrupt. You'll get your turn. All right, she's done. Now you tell her what your problem is, and then we'll figure it out. I mean, it was high school stuff. I was back at high school, you know, with these things. Then that's not something he would have handled, but that's the kind of thing, you know. that had to happen all the time. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. I don't know. People always coming in crying. I used to have a box of tissues on there. What's the problem? I can't stand my boss. Nobody can. Take a tissue. We'll talk about it. You know, they used to call me Big Mom in there. Somebody had to do that, provide the lubricant in there. He needed that. He was too confrontational. He was too quick-tempered. He was foul-mouthed. I couldn't believe the stuff he would say. You know, he literally punched a wall one day. That's how mad he got about something. And Rose says, "Did you see that?" I said, "Nope." I want to give him a Band-Aid, go right ahead, but I didn't see it. I mean, you know, I don't know. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall in his psychiatrist's office if he ever had the guts to do it, but, you know, he was amazing. So, you know, we stood toe-to-toe sometimes. Rose used to tell me, "I don't understand why he doesn't fire you." One day in there, I had a bulletin board outside my little office there, and I used to put up little signs. And one day I got so tired of all the crap that was going on. I put up a sign that said, "The only difference between this place and the Titanic is they had a band." And he came up the steps and he looked at the sign and he looked in there. And he walked away, and she said, "I can't believe that. I can't believe he didn't fire you." I said, "Who else is going to put up with him?"
He needed you to fire you.
Yeah. He never did. So, you know, I did a lot of stuff for him. You know, projects, anything he thought of, whatever he thought of. It was crazy. It was like, you know, one time he wanted to know, these people aren't working hard enough, and I want to know who's got business and who doesn't. And he had me put it on graphs with a computer, you know, tracking everybody's sales. You know, and it turned out, you know, everybody was doing fine, but he always needed more. He needed more, and he ticked people off. He would get somebody good in, and he would tick them off, and they would leave. It was like, you know, the primeval pool of employees. They all learned stuff there, and then they would go and do stuff, you know, as I did. It's just, I learned a lot. I'm grateful for the experience, but I can't tell you he was easy. So your father one day finally said to me, "Either stop complaining about him and make your peace there, or leave. I'm not going to hear it anymore." I said, "You're right, I'm going to go. I'm going to go." Because what ticked it off is I was a member of, the final straw was I was a member of his risk committee, where you had to evaluate tough title policy issues, you know, or review prospective agents. And he had a prospective agent in Florida, and we had looked at the records and what he had done before, and this guy was a sleaze. He had been in trouble before, and it was, to me, as with the rest of this committee, this guy was trouble. So our recommendation to him is, after evaluating this information, we don't think that this is a good thing. And he went out that evening, flew to Florida, and signed him up. He had already decided, but he wanted the cover of the committee saying that, and then the guy stole many hundreds of thousands of dollars from him. And he had the guts to stand up in the company at the meeting, the company meeting, the annual meeting, and say, "We have to do better than this. You guys are not doing the right thing. I just lost all this money in Florida, and it was because, you know, and we have people who are supposed to prevent this kind of thing," i.e. the committee, and I was sitting across from the counsel of the company. And I said, "That's it. I'm out of here." And he said, "I'm right behind you." And I started my search. A classier guy, even if he didn't say it was me, would have said, "We're all in this together. We need to do better." He was pointing fingers at people who had told him the right stuff. and blaming us for his misjudgment. No, I can't work for somebody like that. You know, even if he had gone that far just to say we, I would have swallowed it. So I left a few months after that, and that counsel left right behind me for another couple. He was there only another 2 months after I left. That's what I mean about being a real, he was really a jackass. He really was. Truly. So I was, as I said, I learned a lot. I learned a lot. But then I heard about the job. The Institute was looking for somebody and had been for a year.
Hold the thought. I'm going to switch tapes.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the Institute. Just in time.